Oh man, my coffee got cold already.
Uh-oh.
My day is ruined. Excuse me.
Whoa.
I feel very, I don't know, unequipped to do the podcast this morning. I'm like, my routine lately, I think I mentioned I'm like in the middle of a breakup or something, and my routine is just a mess. I've been like staying up all night, my diet, everything. I've been drinking a lot. Yeah, last night I set an alarm. I was like, okay, I got to get on top of this and stop dicking around. So I got up at 7 a.m. and I've been trying to be productive, but I'm so just like zonked out. Like this is almost the middle of the night for me, typically.
Okay. I get it.
I feel upside down at the moment.
Fair.
But I read your article that you posted and I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was pretty much perfect. It was nice and short, which
I think because we talked about how like some of that stuff is very like fluffy and it's not necessarily meant to be actually helpful. It's just like, I guess, to get people like thinking or talking about it. I thought that was kind of like an interesting place we could go to again in the context of that specifically.
Yeah, and I really like things that take the burden off of the people, the medical professionals and stuff like that. So we talked about this last time, and I think this article represents this, where if somebody has no resources, if they're not seeing a therapist regularly, if they're not talking to people and stuff, they could encounter an article like this and it supports them. It provides assistance, even though it's kind of like elementary, you might say, or whatever. That stuff's important. So I really liked pretty much every paragraph. I was like, oh, I really like that. I really like that. It even touches on what we were talking about like how humans evolve and how technology there isn't a harmony there necessarily, right? Like we use technology because it's very useful to us, but it's our minds aren't really equipped to handle it. So this article goes on to outline the mechanism, right? Of why social media affects your mind, how it affects your well-being. I really like that. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
I guess just wanted to kind of like reinforce some of the points we had already talked about by being like, we're not just pulling this out of our asses. Reputable news sources have been reporting this, scientists are studying it, psychologists are thinking about it and talking about it, and that it's not like something that I see going away anytime soon, or the opinion changing a whole lot from what it already is. I think we're just going to have a deeper understanding of how these types of things tend to like impact us from a mental health state. I would really hope that in the time to come that more resources will become available, and not just kind of willy-nilly or spotty, but like readily available, and that they'll, or at least social media platforms will like take on some of the responsibility of, I guess, creating safe spaces forcibly through their platforms by like changing the way that they like give you content or show you information, or even by like, and maybe this is a bit of a controversial opinion, but restricting like how much content you can actually take in a given period of time. So like you go to TikTok and you're scrolling for 1 or 2 hours, and finally it's just like, okay, you've had enough, you need to take a break now.
Yeah. I feel like there's like widgets or whatever, plugins you can get for your browser that will kind of do things like that.
Even on your phone. iPhone has like what is it called? I used to have it turned on Zephyr's phone because he had a bit of an issue there for a little while. It's like screen time or something, and it's like in the actual settings of your phone. I feel like for kids it's great because as at least on the iOS system, you can set a password, and if the kid doesn't know it, then like when they're done screen time, they're done screen time. Right? But as an adult, especially if the reason you scroll through social media is because you have that like disconnect from I don't want to say emotional well-being, but like self checks and balances, you know, a pop-up on your phone being like, you've had enough, you're going to be like, fuck that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think when you put it on the individual, just because of the nature of human beings and how, you know, innately selfish we are and how we, especially in modern society, have grown to, I don't even want to say be accustomed to, but have a very deep expectation that we get things immediately. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like that's not really realistic to say that like human beings, especially someone who's struggling with mental health issues, is going to make the right choice and be like, I've had enough. You know, I
Yeah.
think that social media companies themselves and the people who make or create or distribute content almost should have the responsibility of that, of being like, well, what does what I do, or not what, but how does what I do impact any given person, you know? And like, do I have a responsibility to then take care of them because of that impact?
Right. And I think ideally that sounds very reasonable and logical.
Oh,
But
it would never happen in a
it
million
would
years,
never
but
happen. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say, I mean, it would require legislation or something, you know, like me being the
all it,
cynical,
you
you
know,
know,
all it would require, literally all it would require is one company to blow up that does it. Think about it. If a huge social media, you know, company like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, like say Zuckerberg over there is like, all right, you can use the metaverse, but you're only allowed to use it 8 hours a day, right?
yeah, but he would never
Everyone
do
else
that.
would have to follow suit. He would never do that because it's not realistic and it wouldn't produce the bottom line that Facebook has come to know. But influential companies like that are always what drives change, you know? And like that's not even just within social media, like any company anywhere.
Yeah.
Look at what Amazon has done for drop shipping and retail, you know, like they've changed not just the way that people shop and the way that they interact with like products and companies, but they've changed like how logistics work worldwide. It's absolutely wild to
Yeah.
dig into, BP dubs, if you're a business nerd like me.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Amazon, people recognize it's become, is it the biggest company at the moment? I know Apple is up there, but they're all jockeying for that position of the biggest company, right? That's all I know.
Everybody wants to have the biggest B. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, but that stuff all seems to me it's motivated by profit, and I see that being very motivating
I wouldn't
to
even call it
people.
profit. I think it's like personal wealth. You know, when you think about the people who benefit most from these enormous companies, it there gets to a certain point where it has literally nothing to do with profit. They don't give a fuck if everything tanks as long as they get to keep their billions. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, we could talk about the mentality of billionaires and stuff like that. We certainly got a lot of characters who it could be interesting. You know, there's a lot of billionaires walking around these days. But I mean, you get a billionaire like Bill Gates, who, you know, I don't know everything he's doing, but they've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is determined to, you know, eradicate diseases and this, that, the other thing. What Bill Gates was just talking about cutting back on beef. You know, he wants to help the environment. And I'm sure he's doing other more selfish things, less charitable things. But then you get guys like Bezos, who I can't think of any charitable thing he's done with his money or influence. He wants to go to outer space, you know, and to me that just seems like another commercial endeavor.
The space race isn't really a new thing for billionaires. Like Musk and what's his face that runs Virgin, they've been doing it for fucking ever.
Bronson or whatever.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
but I guess like what I'm trying to point out is like, you know, they have the resources to take on charitable endeavors, right? If they wanted to. Like there's nothing stopping Zuckerberg from, well, maybe there's some boardroom of other billionaires stopping it, but if he wanted to, he could say, I'm limiting every single person's Facebook usage to 2 hours a day because I think it would be good for people. He would never do that because, you know, his whatever aspect of the pissing contest that drives billionaires to become billionaires, that lifeline would be taken away as soon as he did that. You know, it would have an effect on his power. You know, I think, like you've pointed out, that it would take an influential company doing it to sort of start the trend. Like if somebody does it, others will follow. And I think that's right. We've talked about how important role models are. And usually we say, we talk about role models in terms of like individuals and stuff like that, but like a company can act as a role model. But I'm so cynical, I just think back to like look at the petroleum industry, like oil and gas. We've known for a long time that this stuff is bad for the environment, you know, with carbon dioxide going in. This stuff is not new. It hasn't been new for a very long time. And none of these companies are like stopping, you know, and they're not going, hey, we've thought about it and we're destroying the environment, so we're going to shut down this $1 trillion industry, right? If you look at leaded gasoline, you know, leaded gasoline took 30 years. That's just too long. That's way too long.
I think to that point, a lot of what doesn't drive change is people hiding behind statistics. Because when you think about, you know, specifically when it comes to environmental stuff, a very large portion of the pollution that human beings create is not created by you and me driving our cars every day. It's not created by the amount of plastic that we consume. It's created by giant industry, you know, like producers, right? So it took, I don't know, 70 years or something for companies to be required to even have like proper filtration systems on, you know, like their working floors, not just like the exhaust that goes out into the environment, you know. A great example is Sudbury specifically. When I lived up there, there was this whole kerfuffle about the stacks because they produce immense amounts of pollution, and the entire north is affected by it, not just Sudbury itself and the very close surrounding area. There's large environmental impacts on a lot of indigenous land there, and it plays to like the quality of water and people's accessibility to resources. And the people who own these companies are not just, you know, new billionaires like Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk and stuff. Like they're old money. And they're the people who make the legislation that shapes their industry. So they can hide behind these things and say, oh, well, you know, cars create this, so why should I have to do it? We can make that work. You know, well, let's change the legislation surrounding something smaller that doesn't impact our bottom line. You know, so I think, again, it takes one company to do it well and to do it in a way that shows everyone else, hey, this can be done and we can maintain what we're trying to accomplish here. But those types of things, unfortunately, take people who have really giant fucking balls. Like you gotta have some cojones on you. So, you know, it's few and far between. And I think we've seen it not just in the environmental impact type scenarios or in social media. I think we see it, you know, in just every day-to-day life. Like there's not a lot of human beings that are willing to step outside of their comfort zone and go against what everybody else is doing. I think there's a lot of people who like to think that they do, or they do the like fake it till you make it. But when it comes to the people who actually institute change on a large scale like that, it's almost non-existent now.
Yeah. And you've identified something too, where it's ridiculous that the burden seems to fall on the individual constantly. Like we've seen this in terms of the environment, like the push for the individual, the household to recycle, you know, sort your recycling.
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
Yeah, and then you find out that, you know, you go through all the trouble of sorting your recyclables, some truck picks it up and they incinerate it, or they ship it to China where they incinerate it. And it's like,
Or it
I'm,
all ends up in the ocean anyway.
yeah,
Like,
it's like, I'm doing my
nobody gives a
part.
shit.
There's like a level, like an echelon or something. And yeah, it's like you want to see the people that have the resources and the people that can, you know, leverage their influence a lot more than, I'm going to humble us, you or I, right? It would be nice to see those people, you know, what do they say? Move the needle, you know, like you do see small changes being made. I'm still on environmentalism, which this was not meant to be an environmental podcast, but maybe it is it's a small thing. You know, you do see businesses doing like refill stations and stuff like that to cut down on plastic. You know, you can go and get your hair gel in a glass bottle that you refill or something. It's a step. It's at
But when
that
you,
level
I
that I
will
like.
counter that by a lot of companies, especially larger ones that do it. And I read an article about this the other day, is like how many companies are doing things just for clout? You know, like if
Oh,
you dig past the surface, and the article that I read was actually specifically talking about how companies are trying to seem more size inclusive. And then when you actually go and look at like their sizing charts or like what they actually have available, it's all just marketing,
yeah.
right? So at least in my experience, I find a lot of companies, especially now because it's like trendy, when they say that they're trying to like be more green or they have these social responsibility campaigns, it makes up a very, very, very small portion of either offsetting or instituting programs that actually make change. A lot of it is just marketing. And I think that
Yeah.
it's nice and dandy that people want to believe that that's true, and that, you know, they want to believe that companies are doing well. But again, the burden of proof for that falls on the individual to actually do the research and see like what this company is doing or how they're making these changes and whether or not they're actually being impactful.
Yeah. When you were saying, you know, it's kind of like marketing and virtue signaling in industries, the first thing that popped into mind was products with rainbows on them or whatever, you know, in it to
Fucking hate that
support,
shit.
yeah, the LGBTQ crowd or whatever. And yeah, somebody, I was it this morning or last night when I was browsing, somebody posted like Oreos had made a package of cookies that had like a rainbow on it, and I don't know if it said something about like Happy Pride Month or something, but it was more expensive than the same package that didn't have the rainbow, and it didn't seem to contribute to any kind of charitable organization or anything like that. You know,
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
but there's kind of like two ways I look at that, and it's one, yeah, the cynical. I'm angry because it's kind of like a superficial marketing, cynical, capitalist, consumerist nonsense, right? Like it's a manipulation tactic that seems to be disingenuous. But then at the same time, I'm thinking like that there is an exposure factor, I suppose. You know what I mean? Like there was a point in time in this on this topic for what I'll just call like queer sexualities or something like that, non-traditional sexualities, where it wasn't even spoken about, right? You would never see, you know, a symbol for LGBTQ folks on any packaging. So I'm sort of like, okay, does this represent a changing opinion? Is it a good thing that, you know, even though they're trying to charge more for it and it's all very superficial, it is a move in the other direction. You know, they're acknowledging the struggles of gay folks, queer folks, trans folks, everything in between.
I
It's both.
think
It's kind of shitty and kind of not okay, but interesting.
it really irks me. It really, really irks me when I see things like that. Because I grew up with friends that are queer and gay and lesbian and bisexual, and being pansexual myself, like those were things 15 years ago that we still couldn't talk about. And that, you know, you couldn't get jobs at some of these companies for even whispering, you know, and now they want to plaster it in your face, and on top of that specifically target, like, and maybe I'm being a little biased here, but specifically target like white guilty people, you know, like
Okay, yeah,
most of these issues tend to disproportionately affect um, people of color, and, you know, people who live in communities where, you know, for to use your example, Oreos are an almost unimaginable expense,
mm,
you know? So like you walk into, I don't know, Longos or whatever, and see this big pride display of all these companies that say that they rally for support. Meanwhile, how many people who are directly impacted by those things live in that community? Whereas, like, you know, you go to a community where um, people who are impacted by these things tend to be, and nothing in that area says, I support you.
hmm
You know, I find a lot of corporate, I guess, propaganda surrounding these types of issues, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, pride related or anything like that. Um, Really, anything that addresses the struggles of non-white people are, the marketing for those is targeted to white people, so it makes them feel better and it makes them feel more safe in their communities because it lulls them into this illusion of helping. You know, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to use my hard-earned dollars to help this person that I don't know, because they don't want to do the due diligence, to
right.
actually just go and help those people and to help make the change, but to, you know, give themselves that sense of satisfaction that they did something,
Yeah. So
you know.
it's like a distraction almost. It's like
Oh, it absolutely
instead
is.
of doing something more tangible, I feel like there must be a term for that as a cognitive bias, right? Like throwing $3 at a rainbow bag of Oreos, thinking, oh, I support LGBTQ folks, and then walking past maybe an LGBT person that's been shunned from their home and is on the street and not providing anything to that person. You know what I mean? It's like one of those is a more tangible support than the other. It's like convenience advocacy or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Absolutely.
virtue signaling, I think.
Absolutely it is. And I mean, I think in most recent history, because we are getting into Pride Month here, and that's something that's starting to, you know, really rise, but something that we saw a lot of in the last couple years with some really big movements was like the Every Child Matters stuff in Canada, specifically. And I have some personal situations we can talk about if you want to get into it.
Mm.
But even on a larger scale and in a larger climate, I think was the Black Lives Matter stuff. Like how many companies jumped on that through social media or, you know, traditional media, or through marketing campaigns like in physical stores, and we're trying to profit off of a civil rights movement and the death of a person.
Yeah.
You know, like to me, absolutely disgusting, and I wanted no fucking part of it. You know, like I will gladly march with whoever, you know, to at least voice an opinion about things, and donate to the people who are trying to make these changes and who are trying to present legislation to protect people and for police reform and all these things. And I mean, I have friends that were directly affected by the violence that was shown to people that were
Mm.
protesting. And even here in Canada, like I participated in several protests regarding the calls to action and the reconciliation stuff. And it was a wild time, and it continues to be a wild time. But, you know, like my family specifically was impacted by those things. So maybe I guess have less of a perspective on it and more of a heartfelt opinion. You know, like it's difficult for me to say, yes, I want to change all these things, but I also want to be mad about it. You know, like I have to try and stay removed from both sides to have clear perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's certainly difficult to remain balanced and, you know, to acknowledge your biases and this and that. Um, there's certainly value in feeling your feelings, right? Like if you see the way these campaigns are conducted, or if you have an opinion on the way advertising is manipulated to include virtue signaling and stuff like that, and it makes you angry, you should feel angry and digest that and try to figure out why that is.
Absolutely. But on the flip side of that, it's okay to feel feelings about it, but if you genuinely want to change it or impact it, you have to remove yourself from it. Because if you go into those situations, especially when it involves like large corporate kind of, you know, things, you can't go in there and be like, I'm angry and I want you to change, because they're
Yeah,
just going to be like, okay, angry person, have a good day, here's, you know, a free t-shirt. Whereas
yeah,
if you go in and you're calm and collected and composed and you have actual facts and good points, you can be angry, but you have to be civil,
right.
you know? And I think that's a really big part of how people play against those types of movements, because there's so much emotion involved from people who are specifically impacted by it, that it's really easy to be like, whoa, they're just overreacting.
Yeah, but I think too, as soon as I say this word, some people are going to flip off. But um, the systemic nature of some of this stuff, like if you have an issue with a mom and pop store, you can walk in there and talk to the people that run that thing. But if you have an issue with, like, I don't know, Walmart or Amazon or something, there's so many layers of customer service representatives and things like that between you and anyone that makes a decision, that if you try to express a point like that, like, hey, I don't appreciate the way you're hijacking social movements in order to sell products. How do you talk to somebody? Like, you can't get anywhere near Bezos. He probably isn't anywhere near the people that make those decisions. You know what I mean? Like,
Isn't he not the CEO of Amazon anymore? Like, didn't he step down and somebody else has it?
I think you're right, but then it's like the structure of these things gets so crazy because they have board members. They have to, the shareholders have a collective bargaining influence. Like, it's it's weird how corporations make decisions and approach things. And
But
my,
I think that part, not to to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
no,
Uh,
my point is, it's just kind of nebulous. It's hard to
well, I think that people
make
don't
things happen.
understand the amount of power that they have, right? Like, if you genuinely want to impact a room full of those people, buy a share. You're allowed as a shareholder to go to any shareholder meeting
Right.
and you can voice your opinions. You don't have to own majority or anything. You can own one single share. You can own a partial share of any large corporation like that and attend one of those meetings and voice your concerns. Um, Maybe a little less with COVID. They might have changed the structure a little bit, but pre-COVID times, the whole idea of the public market is that everyone has a say and that everyone will be heard. I think what it comes down to is that the people who have the power in those situations, regardless of how much, they tend to just abuse it
Hmm.
because they're trying to fulfill a bottom line as opposed to actually physically make change, because their moral compass doesn't compel them to do the right thing, because they're not motivated by that most of the time, because they're not directly impacted by it.
Yeah. Yeah. You get these people that are influential, because money is influential, and equality in terms of, certainly in terms of money, is, I want to say it's never been worse, but I'm being hyperbolic. But we're nearing feudal age discrepancy, right? In
let me
terms
ask
of,
you let me ask you this: if you want to think about you know why these types of social changes don't happen, and we've talked about how large corporations, all it takes is one person to make the change. How many people of color do you know that are billionaires that you could just name?
uh, are Mexicans people of color? um,
Yes.
yeah, not too many. What's that guy? Slim. His name is Slim. I don't even know his full name, but he's a telecommunications dude in Mexico, and he was a billionaire. I just want to say, like, world leaders. Muammar Gaddafi, but he's dead. But not too many.
Right, so the people who are directly impacted by any one of those things are not the people who hold the most wealth. They're not the people who hold the most power. So are any of them going to be able to make a change that's going to, you know, domino affect everybody else? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with using money as a metric for influence and power is it's completely dehumanized, you know?
I mean, it absolutely is, but that's unfortunately what our society is propped up on.
Yeah, it's like, you know, the economy is sort of like the fuel for change and in propping up these institutions, but it's like the institutions are kind of not in favor of people.
I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about how much power their specific dollar has. Like every time I go and I'm going to spend money somewhere, the thought crosses my mind first of like, who benefits from this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, unfortunately, my options are relatively limited because I don't drive, and don't have the power to support the things I want to support because they are not in my immediate community and they're not
Right.
accessible to me. So, I mean, I have to make a lot of compromising choices, but I've been working really hard to give myself the freedom to support the things I want to support by putting my dollar where it counts most. And a lot of that time it's back in my own pocket.
Yeah.
to get the dial where I want, you know. But I think a lot of people, that thought maybe doesn't occur to them on a daily basis. Like, how many people are going to go buy Starbucks and be like, is this actually going to the barista or is this going to some billionaire on an island?
Right.
You know, that's a really like broad generalization, but the thought process should be there for more people. And I think if more people were conscious of that, our debt problem probably wouldn't be so bad. Personal debt, I read an article the other day, just in Canada rose like 48% or something. It was insane. Like more people are in debt now than they've ever been, and in a lot of debt, and especially young people with things like Klarna and Sezzle and all these like buy now pay later things, which are ridiculous and completely marketed predatorily.
Yeah, there are a lot of those predatory, like short-term loan things, right? Like Payday or whatever. They pop up all over the place in my neighborhood.
Not even short-term stuff. I get a lot of ads for like Easy Financial and those kinds of things for people who have bad credit. And I'm gonna be real honest. Like when my credit was really shitty and it was under 500 because I just fucked around my whole life and didn't understand how things worked.
Right.
You know, I got a loan. I have paid it on time every single, like I have a 2-week rotating thing. And I've been with them for like 6 years or something because we've, you know, upped it over time. But like the interest rate on that loan, insane. I was literally at the bank on Friday, my bank, to be like, hey, is there anything we can do about this? Because I'm really sick of giving these people all this money and nothing's happening. You know, like my credit kind of got to a point where it was at a standstill. It's not going up, it's not going down, but I'm still paying them the same amount. You know, and it was just like, if I can either get out from under this because now my credit's better, or I can pay a lower interest rate, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, it's a trap, and
but the way that those things are
designed that way.
Absolutely, it is designed to put you into debt and to keep you in debt.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, how do I bring this back around to the article and put us on mental health track?
If you want to improve your mental health by restricting your use of social media, put your money where your mouth is and donate it to companies that are actually making the change.
Well, just to take a step back, we were talking about the value of, you know, your dollar, the individual's dollar. And I think maybe what I'm under the influence of something that's noted in your article about how social media changes your perspective because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. And I do this because when I think about like, what is my net worth? What is Ryan's net worth? It's virtually nothing. So I think if I wanted to make a big change, you know, I would have to.
Are you thinking about net worth in like actual physical monetary value? Or are you thinking about your net worth in like intangible skills, like yourself as a product?
In more of like a material net worth, right? So when you hear something like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or one of these guys that's got a gazillion dollars, they're saying like you would have to work at minimum wage for like a million years to even get 1% of what they have.
Mhm.
I'm comparing myself to them. I'm thinking, well, what the hell? Why would I work my ass off trying to make a bit of change, in my community or whatever, when that guy could do it at the snap of a finger? You know what I mean? So
But then you
what?
have to like rein yourself back in and remember that at one time those dudes were working out of their garages and they were working minimum wage jobs. They just got smart and bent the system or used the system the way it is to get ahead.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to identify is that instead of me putting effort into making change in my community, I've just become completely distracted with thinking that billionaires need to take on that responsibility, and that's prevented me from making the change. So I think like social media, that your article talks about this, how social media, it dements your perspective on things. Like
Well,
the
that
way.
goes right into your
Yeah,
article.
let's take a quick
8% of
break.
people think they can take on an elephant and win. What?
Talking about delusions. Let's take a quick break and then we'll talk about the other article.
All right.
Cool. See you in a sec.